Hi, you guys. All right, so today we're going to be looking at comparing fractions, decimals, and percents. So this is the next section. And one of the things that we are going to be definitely talking about is that when you're comparing a fraction to a decimal, or a decimal to a percent, or a percent to a fraction, or a fraction to a percent, or a decimal to a percent, whatever it is that you're comparing between the two or three entities of three different values, is before you can compare anything, we have to convert them so that all the values are the same, so that they're all in percents, or they're all fractions, or they're all decimals. It just makes your life easier unless you have these memorized. Okay. So the nice thing about this is that you can choose. And if you have a fraction and a decimal, you can choose to convert to fractions or to decimals. Or if you have a decimal and a percent, you can decide to go both to decimals or both to percents, whatever you want. The only rule is that you have to, if they give you a number line, let's say, and the number line has all fractions on it, or all percents, or all decimals, well, then obviously you have to be able to convert to whatever it is that they give you so that you can place those different values on that number line. Okay. So unless they give you a number line with decimals or percents or fractions, then you can choose whichever one you want, because the big part of this is just being able to establish which of the two or which of the three values is the greatest. Okay. So having said that, let's kind of look at this. So the first thing here is we're looking at is which is greater. We're looking at 3/20ths and we're looking at 16%. Now, one of the things, like I said, that is going to be important here that you're going to want to remember. Just as a, cool, thank you. Just as a study tip, okay, I always think that it's easier to order decimals and percents as opposed to ordering fractions. Fractions are messy, no one likes to deal with them. It's easier to try to stick with decimals and percents when and where you can. Now, that's not going to be all the time, like I said, but if you can, try to stay away from those fractions, okay? So if we look at, let's say, 3/20ths here, in 16%, I have a fraction and a percent. I'm going to try to convert this 3/20ths into a percentage. So my step number one is to convert 3/20ths to a percent. So when I set this up, I can do so that 3/20ths is going to be equivalent to something over 100. And remember, the reason it's over 100 is because percent is out of 100. Also, multiplying from 20 to 100 is really easy because I can just multiply by 5. And whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do here to the top. 3 times 5 is 15. 15 over 100 gives me my 15% here. Now I have a 15%, so step number two, a 15% and a 16%. Obviously 16 is bigger than 15, so 16 is greater, which is going to be our answer. Let's look at something a little bit different here. Now I have looking at 79% or looking at 800ths. So you have your choice here. Once again, you can go from percent to percent, or you can convert 79% into decimals, whichever you're more comfortable with, whichever direction. I'm going to do something different than I did in the last example. I'm going to convert 79% to a decimal. Because remember, when you're going from percent to decimal, all you have to do is remove that percent sign and then scoot that little decimal point over. So I'm going to take 79% and I'm going to drop my percentage sign here. So it just turns into 79. Now remember that 79, that invisible decimal is to the right. So we have to move it over once, 2 places to the left, and we get 7900ths. Now, our second step is, now that we've converted them both to decimals, we can compare. So we look at what is greater, 7900ths or 800ths. And 7900ths is clearly greater because this has a 7 in the tens place and this has a 0 in the tens place. So 7900ths is greater, which means that our answer here, 79%, is going to be greater than 800ths. Okay, let's move on. Word problems. Everyone's favorite. Get excited. You, your sister, and a friend each take the same number of shots at a soccer goal. You make 72% of your shots. Your sister makes 19/25 of hers. And your friend makes 67 hundredths of his shots. Who made the fewest shots? So one of the first things you have to remember when you're doing word problems, we always want to identify what is the problem asking us to find. And in this case, the problem is asking us to find the fewest shots. Okay, so that fewest is going to be really important because we know fewest means smallest. So when we go through and we do that, that's an important piece to remember. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to look at conversions. And I have 70, oh, let's not do that. Let's do this. We'll get fancy. So you make 72%. Here's your sister. She's making 19 out of 25. And let's see if I can get a red here that works. We'll go pink. And your friend is making 67 hundredths. All right. So what we want to do is we need to convert. And so step number one, I'm going to convert them all to decimals. And like I said, it doesn't matter. You can go to percent if you want. If you go to percent, you're looking at 19/25. You can just multiply this by 4 and this by 4. This is in 72%. This would be 67%. So you can look at it doing that way. I'm going to decimals. It doesn't matter what you decide to do. So the first one is you make 72%. Says it right up here, okay? So what I'm going to look at is 72%. I drop my percent sign, turns into 72. I move my decimal 2 places to the left, and I get 72 hundredths. Let's go back and make that yellow again. Okay, once, twice, and I get 72 hundredths. There's my first decimal. Your sister makes 19/25. So what I need to do is I need to convert 19/25 to a decimal. And so the first thing is I need to figure out how can I get this to a tenth, a hundredth, a thousandth. And the easiest thing to convert 25 to is out of 100. And once again, we can just multiply here by 4. Whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. 19 times 4 is 76. And 76 out of 100, when we read that in Mathlish, that's 76 hundredths. And so we get 76 hundredths. So far we have 2 of our decimals converted. Now, the nice thing about this is our last one, if you remember, our friend was already in a decimal format. So we had 67 hundredths. That was done for us. Okay, so now we have our 3 decimals here, and now we can go through and compare. And the way that we're going to compare in this one is we're actually going to graph them on a number line. Now in the homework assignment, you're going to see some of your number lines are already going to be given to you in decimals. So remember, you have to convert them to whatever it is that they give you. So what we can look at here is our number line. And our number line is going up by 4 hundredths, okay? So your friend is about 67 hundredths, which is here between 66 and 68. You are at 72 hundredths and your sister is at 76 hundredths. Now that we've graphed them on our number line, we can clearly see that your friend is the least and your sister is the greatest. So we go back up and remind us what the question is asking. The question is asking us who made the fewest shots, not what was the fewest shots in decimals, not who made the most, not what was the greatest percentage made. This question lays opportunity to ask you a whole bunch of different things with all these numbers. So you really have to make sure you're identifying what is it they're asking me, what do they need to know? And they're saying who, which means they want a person, made the fewest shots. Okay, so your friend made the fewest shots. Okay, 67 hundredths is the lowest, so that's your friend. Cool. All right, last part here that we're going to look at. Actually, I kind of like that highlighter. Okay, one more word problem. Real life. All right, this is a map of the United States. Yes, I know you can't really see Alaska and Hawaii. Sorry. But this map shows the portions of the U.S. population that live in 5 different states, okay? Which means that 6% of the population of the entire United States lives in New York. 3/100ths lives in Michigan. 1/50th lives in Washington, 12 hundredths live in California, and 1/25th live in Ohio. Okay, that's what that means. And what the question is asking us to do is it wants us to list the 5 states in order by population from least to greatest, which means that we need to go from smallest to largest. All right. So it's looking for the states and then it's looking from the least to the greatest. It's not necessarily looking for the numbers. It's not looking for the conversion. It's not looking us to say, what is the percentage of people that live in Washington? It wants to just list the states from least to greatest. So that's what we're going to do. Now, you can do this in a few different ways. One of the ways that I did it is because you see here, they give us all these kind of different messy things. Here you have a decimal, here you have a fraction, here you have a percent, here you have a fraction, here you have a decimal. They're all over the place. So we need to convert them all to the same thing. And so what I did was I made a table. And so my table is going to convert all the values to fractions, decimals, and percents. That way I can compare all of the states in the 3 different formats just to make sure I'm doing it correctly because sometimes we get messed up. So what we're going to do here is I made a table for my states, my fractions, my decimal, and my percentage. And the first thing I did here was I just went through and I gave each state a color so that I know that it's organized when I go later to identify what's the least and greatest. And then what I did was I put in what they gave me. So Michigan, you can clearly see here is 300ths, and I literally just got that from my map. New York is 6%. I got that straight from my map. Washington is 1/50th. It came straight from my map. California is 12 hundredths as a decimal, came from my map. And Ohio is 1/25th. Also, that came from my map. Okay. So what I can do now is as I go through, I can look at what do these conversions look like? Well, a decimal of 300ths literally means 3 over 100. So when I look here, there's my fraction of 3 over 100. Now, if I get a 3 out of a test that's worth 100, I know that I'm getting 3%. So remember, all we're doing with our decimal is we can move this decimal point 2 places to the right, and that's how we're getting our decimal. So our percent, sorry. So I'm going to go once, twice, and then I can add the percent sign. And when I add the percent sign, I get 3%. Okay. The next one is New York. New York is 6%. So when I need to do the decimal, I'm going to do it the exact same way, except for now I'm going to go in the reverse direction. So instead of going to the right, now I'm going 2 places to the left, which is going to give me 0.06 as a decimal. And that's going to be my decimal. So I have 600ths as a decimal for New York. 600ths is 6 over 100. So that's my fraction for New York. Washington, I have 1/50th. Well, in order to turn this into a decimal, I first need to figure out what do I need to multiply 50 by to get to a 10th, 100th, 1,000, 10,000, whatever, so that I have some sort of place value. The best place value here is going to be 100. So what I can do is I can look at this and I can say, okay, I need to set this equal to something over 100. And I need to think, okay, what times 50 equals 100? Well, 50 times 2. And so what is 1 times 2? 1 times 2 is 2. All right. So my 2 out of 100, when I read that in my math language, that is 200ths. So my decimal is going to read as 200ths. Then I can go through and I can look at my percentages. And what I can do is we move our decimal 2 places to the right to find our percent, which means that now we have 2%. California, decimal is 12%. Once again, we're going to do the same exact thing. 12 hundredths is our decimal. And we're going to do the same exact thing here. We're going to move our decimal 2 places to the right in order to get our percent. In order to get our percent. And that's going to give us 12%. All right. And 12 hundredths here. Let's see if I can erase. 12 hundredths here reads as a fraction, which is just 12 over 100. And if you want to go through and you want to reduce that, of course you can. you can divide those both by 4. But remember, one of the things that we want to do is keep this all the same. So now we have these all uniformly over 100. So that way, in case that you want to go through and you want to compare them as fractions, you can, because they all have the same denominator. Okay, so we can keep that at 100. If you want to reduce it down to 25ths, of course, you can do that. You would divide both by 4 and you would get 3/25ths as your fraction, right? So Ohio is last, and Ohio has our fraction of 1/25th. Now, having said what I just said, we want to try to keep the denominators the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this as a fraction out of 100, also so that I can convert it to a decimal. So in order to get from 25 to 100, I have to multiply by 4. What I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I'm going to get 4 over 100, which gives me a decimal of 4 hundredths. And when I look at that, it's going to be come on, little guy. Sorry, guys. It's going to be 0.04, because that's how we say 4 hundredths. Now, in order to convert it to a percent, I move my decimal 2 places to the right, once, twice, and I add a percent sign, which means that 1/25th is 4%. So now that we have our fancy Nancy table all completed and all filled out, what we can do is we can go through and we can look at whatever it is, and I'm just erasing this because it's not so messy. Whatever it is, now we can look at what we want to compare. So it depends, once again, if they give you a number line where they are forcing you to use whatever it is that they want to use, then you have to use that. So if they force you on a number line with percent, then you have to use percent. If they force you on a number line with decimal, then you have to use the decimals. If they force you on a number line with fractions, then you have to use fractions. And that's one of the reasons that we want to keep these denominators the same. So here we go. What we can look at here is, what do they give us? Okay, so we have percents. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go in and we're going to put our percents where they are. So I use the colors, and I also use abbreviations because it's easier to put on this number line. It just keeps it cleaner. So Washington is 3, New York is 6, Michigan is 3, New York is 6, Washington is 2, California is 12, and Ohio is 4. So all I'm going to do is take those 5 percentages, and I plotted them on my number line here and here. So I have Washington here at 2%, Michigan at 3, Ohio's at 4, New York is at 6, California is at 12. Now, we've done all this work. It's taken us a good 5 minutes. I completely forgot what the question wanted us to ask, but I know that I've plotted them. I know I can obviously see what is the least to greatest. So I go back up, and I'm going to read the question one more time to figure out what it is exactly asking me. And it wants me to list the states from least to greatest. Okay, so I can do that. I have my states. They're from least to greatest, which means that Washington is the least. Michigan is 3%, so it comes next. I messed up here. That's why that's here. Sorry. Ohio comes 4th. New York is 6th. And California is at 12%, which means that it is the greatest out of these states. Okay. So that is a little real life situation. One thing that you guys can start doing and start thinking, and it'll really help you for your own real life situation, mental math world, is start remembering some of these percents that are decimals that are natural fractions. Like 1/10 is 10%, 25% is 1/4, 50% is 1/2, 3/4 is 75%, it's 75 hundredths. Things like that you want to start looking at memorizing and just being able to kind of knock off like the top of your head. Okay. It also help you with grades. Okay, so that is it for today. That's all I really wanted to show you guys. I will let you guys go, and you can get started on homework, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.